Hi, all, and welcome back to another episode of There's Danger Here. I'm Leilani, and it's the top of the month, so as usual, we are going to get into another one of the MMIW episodes. And let's just jump into this, shall we? Cynthia Albina Audi. Cynthia was from Manitoba's Wooski-Sipnik First Nation. She had a half-sister, Angelita, though the two grew up in different homes. Angelita stated that she and her sister were together the night Cynthia went missing. On October 24th, the then 27-year-old Cynthia and Angelita were at Cynthia's townhouse on Winnipeg's Jarvis Avenue. According to the Winnipeg Police Service, or WPS, it was October 28th, 2004. But Angelita reports this to be false. Of that night, Angelita stated, quote, "I remember the date perfectly because that's the last time I ever saw my sister," end quote. So what happened was the two ran out of beer and Cynthia said she'd go run to get beer, but needed to make money on the way and was known to work the streets to support herself. Angelina went running after her to give her a condom as Cynthia got into a three-seated navy blue and gray Chevrolet pickup truck near the corner of Selkirk Avenue and Andrew Street. But after hours of no Cynthia, Angelita simply went home. She stated of this, quote, "Honestly, my sister wouldn't have left me like that," end quote. Days later, the WPS showed up to take Angelita's statement, reporting that Cynthia's boyfriend actually was the one to report her missing. In July 2012, the WPS handed the case to Project Devote, a Manitoba task force dedicated to the investigating missing and murdered persons cases. I've discussed that task force many times if you listen to any other episodes. Since then, investigators traveled to Toronto twice to see Angelita, who lives there now. The most recent visit was in the fall of 2014. Quote, "They showed me 10 pictures of different guys," end quote, she reported, though she didn't recognize any of them. Angelita stated that what she misses most about her older sister were the surprise visits. Quote, "She was always coming to see me, even though I lived far," end quote. Angelita goes on to report her frustration with the investigation, as she's had to tell details of that night over and over to different investigators, but they are not any closer to finding out what happened to her sister. Continuing that while hope of Cynthia being alive has gone, she would like to know what happened for closure for the family. Quote, "I want to know what happened to my sister," end quote, she said. She also continued and said, quote, "If she's dead, that way I can bury her," end quote, which is a sad but very truthful sentiment. Danielle Marissa LaRue. Danielle was from the Nakonlith Indian Band, nicknamed Holy Smoke. Danielle had a rough life, even from the start. She was the victim of physical and sexual abuse as a child. She was placed in foster care at an early age and ended up running away to Prince George, British Columbia, when she was only 13 years old. As with many of these cases, Danielle ended up addicted to drugs and used sex work to pay for her habit. Still, she remained protective of her younger brother and sister. Then, in November 2002, the then 24-year-old disappeared from Vancouver's downtown east side. The Vancouver police investigated but found nothing. Then, on New Year's Eve of 2002, an anonymous letter was dropped at the Vancouver Police Department's public service counter. In the letter, the writer discussed the disappearance and death of a Vancouver sex trade worker. The person who wrote the letter described Danielle and admitted to killing her, though they didn't know her actual name. The person who wrote the letter even requested, or had the audacity to request, that her name be on the news so they would know who she was. The writer also apologized for taking her life. All this led Vancouver police to believe Danielle was actually murdered, even though her body has never been recovered. Danielle's sister stated, quote, "Not having any answers, that's the worst because I have nightmares. Did she go through a lot of pain? Was it very scary for her?" End quote. In response to the letter. Danita Faith DeGeagle. Danita is the youngest of 6 children and a member of the Ocean Man First Nation. She was also a mother of 2 children, Cassidy and Talon. Danita also had a hard childhood. She was put on Ritalin early on for hyperactivity. She often pulled away from others. And then, when she was young, her parents divorced. That's when Danita had seen a lot of drinking. Her mother stated, quote, "Like I would tell her, why do you want to ruin your life by drinking? Why don't you want to go to school?" And she would say, "Well, you used to do it, and I used to wonder why you did it. Now it's my turn." And I told her, "You know, don't take too long because you could turn into an alcoholic and turn into an addict." I said, "I know from experience. You're missing out on your kids' lives." And she said, "Mom, I won't always be like this." End quote. Her mother says before she disappeared, Danita was trying to reach out for help. She was 22 years old when she was seen for the last time in Regina, Saskatchewan on February 11th, 2007. Her missing persons case is being handled by the Regina Police Service Cold Case Unit. The family no longer communicates with investigators. Diane Begigle said of her daughter, quote, "She always phoned me, no matter what. Well, I mean, I had both of her kids." End quote. She continued by talking about Diane's children, quote, "He was only 9 months old." End quote. She says both are starting to ask questions about what happened to their mother. Quote, "I don't know what to tell them." End quote. Her case is currently at a standstill. With no new leads, it now sits with the Regina Police Cold Service Unit, like I just said. According to the RCMP's database of Canada's missing, Danita was last seen in Regina on February 11, 2007, in the 800 block of Victoria Avenue. Her profile on the site says she rarely leaves Regina and is known to frequent the downtown area, but her mother has a very different story. Diane says her neighbors told her Danita was grabbed by men driving a black SUV, quote, "from right in front of my house. I went to the police, and I went and told them," end quote, she said. At the time, she was living at 1555 Garnett Street. Quote, "I couldn't live there anymore. Like, when she first went missing, I stayed by the phone and waited for her for over 3 months," end quote, she said. Diane doesn't keep in contact with police, like I said, because she says they've mocked her because she kept bringing in tips from people who told her things on the street. Quote, "I won't even talk to them because they are not sincere," end quote. In 2008, there were reports that Danita may have been seen in Manitoba. Diane lost count as to how many times she has traveled to Winnipeg and other areas to scour the streets. Quote, "I was being sent on wild goose chases. Like, why was I doing their job?" End quote, she said, referring to the fact that police kept telling her about possible sightings in Manitoba and Alberta. Darlinda Lee Ritchie. Darlinda was born on September 22nd, 1959, in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. On November 14th, 1986, the then 27-year-old was murdered. She was found in a shallow grave along with Karen Baker, a 20-year-old, by Indian River Road in North Vancouver, British Columbia. David Couture, Darlinda's boyfriend at the time of her murder, was eventually arrested for their murders in 2000. His trial occurred in 2003, in which he was convicted of second-degree murder. But unfortunately, he was acquitted in 2008 after the Supreme Court of Canada ruled that his estranged wife's testimony, which basically made up the whole case, and in which she alleged that he confessed to the killings, should not have been admitted as evidence. At the time, Richie's sister, Corey, said justice had not been served. Quote, "I feel there is no justice system in this country," end quote. She said. She continued, quote, "This is one of many cases of murder in this country where it's a joke, where criminals get to walk for free. The justice system in this country works for the criminal and not for the victims." End quote. Dawn Keewatin. Dawn was 17 when she was murdered in Saskatchewan in 1982. A trial was set for her as well, but it resulted in an acquittal, and since then, there has been no new information. Dawn Cray. Dawn was born on October 26, 1958, in Vancouver, British Columbia. She was the fourth of 7 children. When she was 3, she was out playing with her father when he collapsed. She screamed and called for help, then waited with his head in her lap as he passed away. After that, her mother started drinking, and all the children were separated and sent to various foster homes. Dawn struggled with her mental health, and she really thought that she was to blame. Maybe she needed to move faster, or she could have done more to protect her father. As a result of this, she began using drugs at a relatively young age. She engaged, like many others, in sex work to pay for her habit, which we know police report as a high-risk lifestyle. As an adult, she lived in the downtown east side of Vancouver. She was reported missing on December 11th, 2000, by her doctor actually, after she missed a medical appointment. Foul play is suspected in the 42-year-old's disappearance. Dawn is on the Missing Women's Task Force official missing women's list. Dawn's DNA was actually found on clothing discovered at the Picton farm. And if you've listened to previous episodes, Picton is a pretty big serial killer in Canada. And if you haven't heard about him, you really need to look him up. And while charges were recommended by investigators, unfortunately, there was not enough of Dawn's DNA found to list her as one of the murder victims at his eventual trial. Dawn Teresa Cray is still officially just listed as missing. Deanna Marie Belrose. Deanna was born on October 29, 1972. She was one of 4 children raised by a single mother, as their father wasn't in the picture. Then, when Deanna was a teenager, her mother actually committed suicide. Unfortunately, like many others that we've discussed, she got into drugs and sex work. By 2002, she was a mother of 4 children, Amber, Amy, Tristan, and Julian. Then, on September 9th, 2002, the then 29-year-old was last seen getting into a car near the 95th Street and 105th A Avenue in Edmonton. She was a missing persons with no other information or leads for over a decade until May 16th, 2012, when her remains were found by a surveyor near the Morinville, Alberta, roughly 40 kilometers from where she disappeared. The CARE unit, an RCMP entity that investigates and reviews files of murdered and missing vulnerable persons throughout Alberta, continues to investigate Deanna's case. But those are all the updates we have. None of these cases this week have been resolved. They are all open, and either the women are missing or we know that they have been murdered, but there is no justice for anybody's family. And with that, remember, To all those out there listening, be careful. It's a dangerous world we live in.